I smoothed my cardigan one last time, checking my reflection in the hallway mirror. The auburn waves of my hair caught the warm kitchen light, and I noticed how the gray streaks at my temples seemed more pronounced lately. Tonight had to be perfect. Chloe was bringing home her new boyfriend for the first time, and I wanted to make a good impression. After my divorce last year, these moments with my daughter felt more precious than ever. The dining room table gleamed under the chandelier set with my grandmother's china. The aroma of rosemary chicken filled the house, mixing with the scent of vanilla candles I'd lit throughout the living room. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the centerpiece for the third time. At 53, I thought I'd outgrown this kind of nervousness, but something about meeting Chloe's serious boyfriend made my stomach flutter with anxiety. She'd been so secretive about him, only mentioning his name in passing. Ethan, she'd said with that dreamy smile that meant she was truly smitten. I hadn't seen her this happy since college. The kitchen timer chimed, pulling me from my thoughts. I hurried to check the potatoes, my comfortable flats clicking against the hardwood floors. Everything needed to be just right for my baby girl. Car doors slammed outside, followed by Chloe's familiar laughter, that bright, musical sound that had filled this house since she was small. My heart swelled with the kind of maternal pride that never fades, no matter how old your child gets. I wiped my hands on my apron and headed toward the front door. Through the frosted glass, I could see two silhouettes approaching. Chloe's petite frame was unmistakable, bouncing with excitement as she walked. The doorbell rang, its cheerful chime echoing through the foyer. I took a deep breath, smoothed my hair once more, and reached for the handle. Time to meet the man who'd captured my daughter's heart. The door swung open, and my world tilted on its axis. Standing beside my beautiful daughter, his arm casually draped around her shoulders, was a face I'd never forgotten. Those piercing gray-blue eyes that had haunted my dreams for 3 decades. Ethan. My Ethan. The man who'd vanished from my life without explanation, leaving only questions and heartbreak in his wake. He looked older, distinguished silver threading through his dark hair, but unmistakably him. My knees went weak. The blood drained from my face so quickly I thought I might faint right there on my own doorstep. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some cruel joke. "Mom, I'd like you to meet Ethan," Chloe said, her blue eyes sparkling with happiness. She had no idea she'd just introduced me to the ghost of my past, the man who'd broken me completely 30 years ago. Ethan stepped forward, extending his hand with a warm, practiced smile. "Mrs. Patterson, it's such a pleasure to meet you. Chloe's told me so much about you." His voice was exactly the same, rich and smooth, like aged whiskey. I stared at his outstretched hand, paralyzed. He was acting like we'd never met, like he hadn't held me in his arms and whispered promises he'd never keep. Like he was truly meeting me for the first time. Somehow my body moved independently of my shocked mind. I took his hand, feeling the familiar warmth of his skin against mine. The contact sent electricity shooting up my arm, just like it had all those years ago. "Please, call me Laura," I managed to say, surprised my voice sounded steady. Inside, I was screaming. How was this possible? Why was he here, with my daughter of all people? Chloe beamed between us, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. "Isn't he wonderful, Mum? I knew you'd love him." Her words felt like shards of glass in my chest, each one cutting deeper. The meal passed in a surreal haze. I moved through the motions like an actress in a play I'd never auditioned for. Serving food, making small talk, pretending my world hadn't just exploded into a million pieces. Ethan was charming, attentive to Chloe, and perfectly polite to me. He complimented my cooking, asked thoughtful questions, and made my daughter laugh with easy humor. The perfect boyfriend persona he was projecting felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Across the table, Chloe glowed with happiness. She kept reaching for his hand, her engagement ring catching the candlelight. Wait, engagement ring? When had that happened? My heart hammered against my ribs. This chicken reminds me of a little place I used to know, Ethan said casually, cutting another bite. They had the most amazing rosemary potatoes. What was it called? Giovanni's, I think. My fork clattered against my plate. Giovanni's, the tiny Italian restaurant where we'd had our first real date, where he'd told me he loved me, across a table lit by flickering candlelight, just like this one. Chloe didn't notice the reference, but I saw the way Ethan's eyes flickered to mine for just a moment. There was something calculating in that glance, something that made my skin crawl with dread. As I cleared the dinner plates, Ethan stood to help. It was a gentlemanly gesture that made Chloe smile and my stomach turn. When he reached past me for the serving bowl, his lips brushed close to my ear. "You still smell like jasmine," he whispered, so softly only I could hear. It was what he used to say when he held me close, when the world felt full of endless possibility. The plates nearly slipped from my trembling hands. He did remember. This wasn't some cosmic coincidence or case of mistaken identity. Ethan knew exactly who I was, and he was here with my daughter anyway. Hours after they'd left, I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling. Sleep felt impossible, with my mind racing through 1,000 questions. Why had Ethan disappeared all those years ago? Why was he back now? With Chloe, the digital clock glowed 3:47 a.m., its red numbers burning into my tired eyes. I kept replaying every moment of the evening, searching for clues I'd missed. The way he'd studied our family photos on the mantelpiece. How he'd known Chloe took her coffee black. My daughter was in love with the man who'd destroyed me. The irony was too cruel, too calculated to be coincidence. There had to be more to this than a twist of fate. Coffee tasted like ash in my mouth as I sat at my kitchen table, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Pale morning light filtered through the curtains, highlighting the remnants of our dinner. Empty wine glasses and crumpled napkins seemed to mock me. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe grief and loneliness had finally caught up with me, making me see ghosts where none existed. 30 years was a long time. People changed, aged, became unrecognizable. But those eyes, those hands, the way he moved, the subtle inflection in his voice when he said my name. Every cell in my body recognized him, even if my rational mind wanted to deny it. I pulled out my laptop with shaking fingers, searching for answers in the digital age's endless records. Social media, public records, anything that might explain how Ethan had found his way back into my life through my daughter. Chloe's Instagram was a treasure trove of information, her life documented in carefully curated squares. I scrolled back through months of posts, looking for the first mention of this mysterious boyfriend who'd swept her off her feet. There, 3 months ago, a photo of 2 coffee cups on a cafe table, captioned, "Perfect morning with my perfect guy." The timestamp showed 8:23 a.m. on a Tuesday. My heart sank as I recognized the location. The coffee shop 2 blocks from Chloe's apartment. My fingers flew across the keyboard, diving deeper into Chloe's digital history. Photo after photo revealed a disturbing pattern. Ethan appeared in the background of shots from months before they'd supposedly met. A figure at the edge of her gym selfies. A shadow in the reflection of her car window. The coffee shop where they'd had their first encounter was right next to the yoga studio where Chloe taught Tuesday morning classes. The same studio she'd been teaching at for 2 years, posting her schedule religiously on social media. This wasn't chance. This was hunting. Ethan had studied my daughter like prey, learning her routines and preferences before orchestrating their seemingly romantic first meeting. The realization made bile rise in my throat. Marcus Rodriguez had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, but his weathered face spoke of too many ugly truths uncovered in 30 years of private investigation. His office smelled like old coffee and disappointment, filing cabinets stuffed with other people's secrets. "I need to know everything about this man," I said, sliding Ethan's photo across the scarred wooden desk. His real name, where he's been, what he wants with my daughter. Marcus studied the image with professional detachment. "How long have you known him?" he asked, his pen poised over a legal pad. I took a shaky breath, preparing to excavate the past I'd buried so deep. "We dated 30 years ago," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. It was intense, passionate. He said he loved me, talked about marriage and children. Then one day, he just disappeared. No note, no explanation. Marcus nodded, making notes without judgment. In his line of work, he'd probably heard stranger stories. But this was my life, my heart that had been shattered, and was now being threatened again, through my daughter. I was 23, naive. I thought we had forever. The words tasted bitter, dragging up pain I'd spent decades learning to live with. Now he's back, and he's dating my daughter. It can't be coincidence. Within 48 hours, Marcus had compiled a file that made my blood run cold. Ethan had been watching our family for years, using social media and public records to track our lives with methodical precision. "He moved to your city 2 years ago," Marcus explained, spreading photos and documents across his desk. "Changed his name from Ethan Morrison to Ethan Mitchell. Joined the same gym as your daughter. Enrolled in photography classes at her community college." The evidence was overwhelming and terrifying. Screenshots of Chloe's posts that Ethan had liked going back 18 months. Credit card receipts showing him eating at her favorite restaurants, shopping at stores she frequented. Building a profile, learning her preferences. The worst revelation came in a manila folder marked "similar patterns." Marcus had found 2 other women whose lives Ethan had systematically destroyed through elaborate deceptions involving their children or family members. Sarah Chen, a widow from Portland whose son Ethan had befriended and manipulated, draining the family's savings before disappearing. Rebecca Torres from Phoenix, whose teenage daughter Ethan had groomed before the girl's suicide attempt exposed his psychological abuse. "He has a type," Marcus said grimly. "Single mothers, vulnerable families. He finds their weak points and exploits them. Your daughter isn't his first target, Mrs. Patterson. She's just the latest." I dialed Sarah Chen's number with trembling fingers, knowing I needed to hear her story firsthand. Her voice was small and careful when she answered, like someone still afraid of making too much noise. "He destroyed us," she whispered when I explained why I was calling. "My son Jake, he was so lonely after his father died. Ethan became like a mentor, a friend. By the time I realized what was happening, Jake was completely under his influence." Her pain echoed through the phone line, a mirror of my own terror. "He took everything, our savings, our home, our trust in each other. Jake blamed me when Ethan disappeared. Said I drove away the only person who understood him." "How do I protect my daughter?" I asked Sarah, my voice breaking. "She's completely infatuated with him. She won't listen to anything I say against him." The question hung between us like a desperate prayer. Sarah's sigh was heavy with hard-earned wisdom. "He's probably already started isolating her from you, making her question your motives. That's his pattern. He becomes the most important person in their world, then turns them against anyone who might interfere." I thought of Chloe's recent distance, how she'd been less responsive to my calls and texts, how she'd cancelled our weekly lunch dates, claiming she was too busy with work and her new relationship. I found Ethan at the trendy downtown cafe, where he'd had his meet cute with Chloe. He sat alone at a corner table, reading the newspaper like a man without a care in the world. Seeing him there, so casual and confident, made fury burn in my chest. "We need to talk," I said, sliding into the chair across from him. Up close, I could see the lines around his eyes, the careful way he'd styled his silver-threaded hair to look distinguished rather than aged. He looked up with that same practiced smile he'd worn at dinner. "Laura, what a pleasant surprise. Chloe's not with me today, I'm afraid. She's teaching her morning yoga class." Of course he knew her schedule. "Cut the act, Ethan. I know who you are and what you're doing." My voice was steady despite the rage coursing through my veins. "I've hired a private investigator. I know about Sarah Chen and Rebecca Torres. So just a moment, his composed facade cracked. A flash of something cold and calculating flickered across his features before the charming mask slipped back into place. But I'd seen the real him underneath, and it chilled me to the bone. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about," he said smoothly, folding his newspaper with precise movements. "Perhaps you should speak to someone about these paranoid delusions. Stress can do terrible things to the mind." "Why my daughter?" I demanded, leaning forward. "If you have some grievance with me, take it up with me. Leave Chloe out of this sick game." My hands clenched into fists on the small cafe table. Ethan's smile turned predatory. "Game? Oh, Laura, this isn't a game. This is justice." His voice dropped to a whisper, intimate and threatening. "You broke my heart 30 years ago. Now, I'm going to break something of yours." The casual cruelty in his tone made my blood freeze. "I broke your heart? You're the one who disappeared without a word. You're the one who left me wondering what I'd done wrong for 30 years. You were going to leave me," he hissed, his mask finally slipping completely. "I found the graduate school acceptance letter hidden in your apartment. Stanford, full scholarship. You were planning to abandon me for your precious career." The memory hit me like a physical blow. The acceptance letter I'd hidden because I didn't know how to tell him. I'd never planned to leave him, only to ask him to come with me. But he disappeared before I could explain. "I wanted you to come with me," I whispered. "I was trying to find the courage to ask you to move to California together. I never intended to leave you behind." 30 years of misunderstanding crystallized into this moment of horrible clarity. Ethan's laugh was bitter and cold. Too late for explanations now. I've spent 3 decades building my life around the pain you caused me. Your daughter is just the final piece of my masterpiece. His grey-blue eyes were empty of any warmth or humanity. "She loves you," I pleaded desperately. "Whatever you think I did to you, don't punish her for it. She's innocent in all this." My voice cracked with the weight of maternal terror. He stood up, straightening his perfectly pressed shirt. "Love is just another weapon, Laura, and your daughter is about to learn that lesson the hard way." With that, he walked away, leaving me shattered at the small cafe table. I tried calling Chloe immediately, my fingers fumbling with my phone as I sat in my car outside the cafe. It went straight to voicemail. Her cheerful recorded message felt like a mockery of the nightmare unfolding around us. "Honey, please call me," I said after the beep. "It's important. It's about Ethan. There are things you need to know about him, about his past." My voice sounded strained and desperate even to my own ears. Within an hour, she called back, but her tone was cold and distant. "Mom, Ethan told me you confronted him today. He said you made some pretty wild accusations. Are you feeling okay?" "Chloe, listen to me carefully," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and rational. "Ethan is not who he says he is. I've hired a private investigator, and we found evidence that he's been stalking you for months before you met." Her laugh was sharp and disbelieving. "Stalking me? Mom, that's insane. He's the most gentle, loving man I've ever met. He would never hurt anyone." The faith in her voice made my heart break a little more. "I have proof, sweetheart. Photos, credit card receipts, documentation of a pattern of abuse with other families. Please, just let me show you what I found." I was betting my own daughter to trust me, and the role reversal felt surreal. "I can't believe you hired someone to investigate my boyfriend," Chloe said, her voice rising with anger. "That's crazy behavior, Mom. Ethan was right when he said you might be having trouble adjusting to being alone." The words hit like physical blows. He'd been preparing for this moment, planting seeds of doubt about my mental state. "When did he say that?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "He's been worried about you since that dinner. Said you seemed unstable, obsessed with some imaginary past between you two. He thinks you might need professional help." Each word was a nail in the coffin of our relationship. Over the next few weeks, Chloe became increasingly distant. She stopped returning my calls and canceled our standing lunch dates. When I drove by her apartment, Ethan's car was always in the parking lot, like he was guarding her. I tried reaching out to her friends, but they reported that she'd been pulling away from everyone lately. She says she's busy with work and her relationship. Her best friend Emma told me. But it's weird, you know? She used to tell me everything. The pattern Sarah Chen had described was playing out exactly as predicted. Ethan was systematically cutting Chloe off from her support system, making her dependent on him alone. I was watching my daughter disappear before my eyes. Marcus called with more disturbing news. He's moved in with her, the investigator reported. And there's been some unusual financial activity on her accounts. Large withdrawals, transfers to accounts we can't trace. It's starting, Mrs. Patterson. I felt sick. This was how it had begun with his other victims. The slow siphoning of resources while he maintained psychological control. My independent, smart daughter was being systematically destroyed, and she couldn't see it happening. We need to move fast, Marcus continued. I've been in touch with Detective Morrison in Portland, the officer who worked Sarah Chen's case. If we can establish a pattern of fraud across state lines, we might be able to get federal involvement. The wedding invitation arrived on cream-colored cardstock with elegant gold lettering. Chloe and Ethan would be married in 6 weeks at the Botanical Gardens downtown. My name wasn't on the guest list, but a handwritten note was tucked inside. Mom, I want you there despite our recent differences. Ethan thinks it might help with your healing process if you see how happy we are together. Please come and give us your blessing. It was signed with the heart symbol she'd been drawing next to her name since childhood. The manipulation was breathtaking in its cruelty. He wanted me there to witness his final victory, to see him claim my daughter completely, while I stood powerless to stop it. The invitation felt like a declaration of war. I showed up at Chloe's yoga studio, hoping to catch her alone. Through the window, I watched her lead a class through sun salutations, her blonde hair catching the late afternoon light. She looked thin, fragile in a way that made my maternal instincts scream. After class, I waited by her car. When she saw me, her expression shifted from surprise to something like pity. Mom, you really shouldn't be here. This looks like stalking behavior. The clinical way she spoke to me felt like ice in my veins. I'm your mother, I said simply. I love you more than anything in this world. If you won't listen to me about Ethan's past, at least listen to your own instincts. Are you truly happy? For just a moment, I saw uncertainty flicker across her face. Her hand moved unconsciously to her ribs, a gesture that made alarm bells ring in my head. Of course I'm happy, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Has he hurt you? I asked gently, taking a step closer. Physically, I mean, because if he has... I let the sentence hang, watching her carefully. She wrapped her arms around herself, a protective gesture I recognized from her childhood. He's never hurt me, she said quickly. He gets frustrated sometimes about your behavior. He thinks you might do something to ruin our wedding. The words sounded rehearsed, like she'd been coached on what to say. Chloe, please, I begged, reaching for her hand. Just postpone the wedding. Give yourself time to think. If he really loves you, he'll understand. I could feel her slipping away from me, perhaps forever. She pulled her hand back as if my touch burned her. I'm marrying him in 6 weeks, Mom, with or without your support. Ethan says maybe after the wedding, when I feel more secure in our relationship, we can work on rebuilding our family connections. The calculated nature of that statement chilled me. He was already planning the long game, using the promise of future reconciliation to keep her compliant. I watched my daughter walk away, knowing it might be the last real conversation we'd ever have. I called Sarah Chen again, desperate for any strategy that might work. Did you ever try intervention-style approach? I asked. Getting all the people who loved your son together to confront Ethan publicly. We tried everything, Sarah said sadly. But by the time we acted, Ethan had already convinced Jake that we were all against their friendship because we were jealous and controlling. Jake defended him right up until the moment Ethan disappeared with our money. Her words were like a prophecy of my own future, but I couldn't give up. There had to be something, some way to reach Chloe before it was too late. The wedding was now just 3 weeks away. Marcus and I worked frantically to build an ironclad case against Ethan. We had documentation of his previous identities, testimony from his victims, and evidence of his methodical stalking of my daughter. But would it be enough to convince a young woman in love? The timing is crucial, Marcus warned. If we confront her too early, he'll have time to counteract our evidence with more manipulation. Too late, and she'll be legally bound to him. We get one shot at this. I thought about Chloe's protective gesture at the yoga studio, the way she'd unconsciously touched her ribs. If he was already hurting her physically, how much worse would it get once he had legal claim to her as his wife? We decided on the wedding day itself. It was risky, theatrical, and would likely traumatize everyone involved. But it was also the one moment when all the people who loved Chloe would be gathered together, when the contrast between Ethan's public persona and private cruelty would be most stark. I contacted Emma, Chloe's best friend, and her cousin Michelle. Neither had been comfortable with how quickly the relationship was moving, and both agreed to help. We would need witnesses, people Chloe trusted, to validate what we revealed. The next 3 weeks passed like a countdown to an execution. Every day brought me closer to either saving my daughter or losing her forever. There would be no second chances after this. The botanical gardens were gorgeous in the late spring sunshine, with flowering trees creating a canopy over the assembled guests. I sat in the back, watching my daughter's friends and co-workers fill the white folding chairs. Many looked uncomfortable, unsure why they were at such a rushed ceremony. Chloe emerged from the bridal suite looking ethereal in white silk, but I could see the concealer covering what looked like finger-shaped bruises on her upper arms. My hands clenched into fists, rage and maternal protectiveness warring in my chest. Ethan waited at the altar in a perfectly tailored suit, playing the role of devoted groom. When his eyes found mine in the crowd, he smiled that cold, calculating smile. He thought he'd won completely. The officiant began the ceremony, his voice carrying over the gathered crowd. We are here today to witness the union of Chloe and Ethan in marriage. I felt my heart hammering against my ribs, knowing that in just minutes, I would either save or destroy my relationship with my daughter. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the marriage, I stood up slowly. The rustle of my dress seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. Every face turned toward me, but I only had eyes for Chloe. I object, I said clearly, my voice carrying across the gardens. Chloe's face went white, then red with embarrassment and anger. Ethan's expression shifted to something dangerous, his mask slipping for everyone to see. This man is not who he claims to be, I announced, walking toward the altar with Marcus beside me. His real name is Ethan Morrison, and he has spent 2 years systematically stalking my daughter to orchestrate this moment. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Marcus activated a portable speaker. Ethan's voice filled the air, the recording I'd made of our confrontation at the cafe. You broke my heart 30 years ago. Now I'm going to break something of yours. Chloe staggered backward, her bouquet falling to the ground. That's not, he wouldn't. But even as she protested, I could see the pieces clicking together in her mind, explaining things she'd been too in love to question. Emma and Michelle stepped forward with printed emails and text messages, evidence of how Ethan had been isolating Chloe from her friends. He's been intercepting our messages, Emma said, her voice shaking, telling us you were too busy to see us, while telling you we didn't want to hang out anymore. The methodical cruelty of his manipulation was laid bare before everyone. Sarah Chen's testimony played through the speakers, describing how he destroyed her family. Then Rebecca Torres's voice, broken but determined to prevent another tragedy. Ethan finally dropped his pretense completely, his face twisting with rage. "You interfering bitch," he snarled at me, lunging forward. Several guests moved to restrain him, finally seeing the monster beneath the charming exterior. Chloe collapsed into a chair, her wedding dress pooling around her like spilled milk. The weight of realization was crushing her, and I ached to comfort her, but knew she needed space to process the enormity of the deception. "The finances," she whispered, looking up at me with hollow eyes. "He's been managing my accounts, said it was to help with wedding expenses." Her voice broke on the last words, understanding that she'd been robbed as well as betrayed. Police sirens wailed in the distance, summoned by Marcus when it became clear Ethan wasn't going to go quietly. The man I'd once loved was shouting threats and curses, his true nature on full display for everyone who'd believed his lies. Detective Morrison arrived, with federal agents armed with warrants for Ethan's arrest on charges of fraud, stalking, and identity theft across multiple states. As they read him his rights, he looked directly at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over, Laura," he spat as they cuffed him. "You think you've won, but you've destroyed your own daughter. She'll never forgive you for humiliating her like this." His words were designed to wound, one final manipulation attempt. But I saw something different in Chloe's eyes as she watched him being led away. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. She was seeing him clearly for the first time, without the filter of manufactured love clouding her judgment. The reception hall we'd reserved became an impromptu crisis center. Chloe's friends rallied around her, offering comfort and practical support. A financial advisor arrived to help untangle her accounts and recover what money could be salvaged. I kept my distance, knowing that my presence might be more painful than helpful right now. But when Chloe looked up from the pile of legal documents, her eyes found mine across the room. There was hurt there, but also something like gratitude. "Mum," she said quietly, and I moved to her side. "I'm so sorry I didn't listen to you." Her voice was small and broken, but it was my daughter speaking to me again, not Ethan's puppet. The next few months were difficult. Chloe moved back home temporarily while she rebuilt her finances and her sense of self. We found her a therapist who specialized in psychological manipulation, Dr. Chen, who helped her understand how thoroughly Ethan had rewired her thinking. There were setbacks, moments when she blamed me for not trying harder to reach her, or blamed herself for being so easily deceived. But slowly, painfully, we began to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of truth and trust. The trial was scheduled for the following spring. Ethan had been denied bail after the prosecution successfully argued he was a flight risk, with a history of assuming false identities. 3 more victims had come forward after his arrest, creating a pattern of predatory behavior spanning decades. Chloe returned to teaching yoga, finding healing in the practice of mindfulness and body awareness. She spoke openly about her experience, becoming an advocate for other victims of psychological manipulation. Her strength amazed me daily. "I keep thinking about all the red flags I ignored," she said, one evening as we cooked dinner together. "The way he isolated me from friends, controlled my money, made me doubt my own perceptions. How did I not see it?" "Because you loved him," I replied simply. "And love makes us vulnerable. That's not a flaw, sweetheart. That's what makes you human." We worked in comfortable silence, rebuilding our bond, one shared meal at a time. A year later, we sat in the same botanical gardens where the wedding was supposed to have taken place. This time, we were there for the memorial service of Mrs. Henderson, Chloe's former neighbor, and the setting held no power to hurt us anymore. "I'm thinking of dating again," Chloe said suddenly, watching butterflies dance among the flowering bushes. "Dr. Chen thinks I'm ready, but I'm terrified of making the same mistakes." Her honesty was a gift, a sign of how far we'd both come. I took her hand, noting how strong and steady it felt in mine. "You're not the same person who fell for Ethan's lies," I told her. "You're wiser now, more aware. Trust yourself, but also trust the people who love you to help you see clearly." As we walked through the gardens together, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us to this moment. Ethan's reappearance in our lives had been devastating, but it had also forced us to confront hard truths about vulnerability, trust, and the lengths people would go to for revenge. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd just talked to him 30 years ago?" I asked Chloe. "If I'd explained about the Stanford letter instead of hiding it?" The what-ifs still haunted me sometimes. Chloe squeezed my hand. "People who are capable of what he did don't change because of one conversation, Mum. He made his choices, and they led him down a dark path that was never your fault." Her wisdom humbled me. The trial ended with Ethan receiving a 25-year sentence for fraud, stalking, and emotional abuse across multiple states. As the verdict was read, I felt no satisfaction, only a profound sadness for all the lives he damaged in his quest for twisted revenge. Chloe testified via video link, her voice strong and clear as she described the systematic isolation and control she'd experienced. When it was over, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "It's really finished now," she said. We drove home through the city we'd both learned to love again, past the coffee shop where Ethan had hunted my daughter, past the yoga studio where she'd reclaimed her strength. The future stretched ahead of us, uncertain, but no longer clouded by the shadows of the past. That evening, as we shared a bottle of wine on my back porch, Chloe asked me about my relationship with her father, the marriage that had ended in divorce the year before Ethan reappeared. "Do you think you'll ever trust someone completely again?" I considered the question carefully. I think trust is something you build slowly with someone who proves themselves worthy of it over time. What Ethan taught us is that grand gestures and passionate declarations can hide terrible intentions. "But that doesn't mean we stop believing in love, does it?" she asked, and I heard hope in her voice. At 26, she was still young enough to believe in happy endings, and I was grateful that Ethan hadn't stolen that from her completely.